Hi, this is Parent Coach Janet Bonnin of Fine-Tuned Families, welcoming you to another great conversation for busy parents. We created Wise Parents, Wise Kids as a way to help you parent smarter. Fine-Tuned Families is on the web at www.finetunedfamilies.com. When you visit the website, you can connect with us via LinkedIn, Twitter, and our Facebook community. This is Parent Coach Janet Bonnin of Fine-Tuned Families, welcoming you to our October 8th show here just north of San Antonio, Texas. Also visiting with us today is Angela Woodrow, parent advocate and project navigator. Hi, Angie. How are you doing?
Hi, Janet. I'm doing great. Thanks.
We've got a great show for you today. Our guest is Karen Aitken, a fantastic Texas teacher and the founder of a company called Classroom Management Specialists. Karen is a veteran educator and has developed training programs in the areas of classroom management, character building, and techniques for dealing with bullying. She has published several articles on these subjects and a workbook for classroom management titled Building Custom Kids. Karen has also authored several short stories and is working on self-publishing a children's book. Welcome, Karen.
Well, thank you. Glad to be here.
So Karen's joining us today, and we are going to start off a two-part series talking about the different types of learning styles and how we can identify our preferred learning styles and that of each of our kids. Karen, would you like to start us off with any particular comments here before we jump into the questions?
I find this subject to be very important because as a teacher, I realize how important it is for kids to understand themselves and how they learn. And I'll be sharing some examples, personal examples of how that has affected my students.
Wonderful, wonderful. All right, well, let's jump right in. And would you please tell us what is a learning style?
A learning style is a way that we learn and process information that works best for an individual. And there are three types, which are actually the visual, auditory, tactile, which is known as kinesthetic. It is very important that a child understand how they learn. We tell children that all children learn differently. And a lot of times they don't understand why they become frustrated when they're hearing information. An example I have of that is I had a little boy, we were giving instruction, he was sitting on the floor, and he was holding his eyes wide open. And I asked him, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm trying to pay attention." And later when he went back to his desk, he was working on the independent part of the instruction, and he burst out crying. So I took him out in the hall, and I said, what's the matter? What's going on? He said, "I tried so hard to pay attention, and I don't know what to do." And then It was at that moment that I said, well, because you learn differently. Just sitting there and trying to look wasn't working for you. So we need to understand your learning style. And later that week, after we had some conversation about what was best for him, he was sitting on the floor, and then when it was time to go back, he stood up and he said, "I got the first part of the instruction," he said, "but I didn't get the rest." And so I said, okay, and I sent him out in the hall with a peer teacher, and he came back in just a few seconds later and said, "I've got it." He just needed a little clarification, but he's beginning to understand himself and how he processes information, and it's helping him be more confident and more successful.
Wonderful, wonderful. That's a great story. So can you tell us a little bit more about each of the three different learning styles?
Absolutely. Auditory learners work best if they're able to hear information. They prefer verbal instructions. They're the ones that are able to tune out other sounds and distractions around them. They're able to listen and process that information. They're the ones that when you give them directions, instructions, are able to go back and immediately be successful doing that. That's their preferred way of learning. Visual learners are most effective at retaining information when they're able to see instruction in terms of written words or illustrations, graphic organizers, posters, lots of visual. It's the captions and illustrations in books that really work well for them. Kinesthetic learners, also known as tactile, they work best based on what feels right. They prefer to activities that are hands-on. They want to get right into working on something, and that's how they understand things better. Now, often it isn't just one preferred style. It might be a combination that works well for that child.
So they might have strengths in more than one type of learning style, or they might be able to depend on either of two types of learning styles for learning.
Right. And there is a website I'd like to recommend that gives a lot of information on each of these. It's www.ehow.com.education. And I visited that website, and it gives a lot of breakdown into the different styles.
Great. Thank you for that. And would you repeat that website one more time, Karen?
It's www.ehow.com.education.
All right. That sounds fantastic. And when they get to the website, is there any particular place that they need to look or something they need to put in a search block to find this?
It should go right to it. It has... It will also give them a lot of reference to other websites as well. It breaks down the differentiated instruction. I found it very informational.
Mm-hmm. All right, that sounds wonderful. So let's move on to another question that I find very interesting, and that is thinking about these three types of learning styles. How do I figure out what my preferred learning style is as a parent? And then in addition to that, how do I kind of figure out what each of my children's preferred learning styles might be?
Well, again, there are some websites which I will give you that information that you can go to if you have access to technology, computer. One of them is interactive. It gives you 20 questions that you fill in. It's interactive, and then it will assess you and tell you what your strength is. And the other websites that I have will give you the information. I think a lot of it, too, is getting to understand your child or your student and what their strengths are, what their hobbies, their athletic abilities, artistic abilities, all help us have a better understanding of who they are. And a lot of it is that self-awareness, leading them to understand what is working best for them, trying some different approaches to learning that helps them realize where they're the most successful. The website that has the interactive 20 questions is www.educationplanner.org/learning-styles. And this is a nice one because you just answer the questions, you submit, and it will assess you immediately. I think it helps to understand how you learn compared to how your child learns.
All righty. And again, would you please repeat the website?
It's www.educationplanner.org/learning-styles.
Thank you. All right. Well, we're moving through this content rather fast. I wanted to ask and see, do you have any particular stories or examples that come to mind of another student that you helped figure out what their learning styles were or something like that, any kind of success stories that you can think of?
Well, I think most teachers are differentiating instruction on a daily basis. Most teachers realize that good instruction isn't given just one way. And so we find many different approaches that work well with our kids, trying to make sure that we're reaching every student and helping them to be successful. I think, too, that another example that I think is really pertinent is I had a little girl that could not just sit in a chair. And rather than immediately label a child ADHD, we like to try to find out, well, is there something else that might work with her? And I found that if you gave her a clipboard and had her sit on the floor, she was, chances to move around more often worked well with her. Well, it was very easy to assess and find out what approach worked with her, which was kinesthetic. Very successful in any hands-on projects. If we were doing a play, anything that required any movement or interaction or theatrics, she was able to be very, very successful. I have a lot of students that have attention problems, trying to focus and pay attention. So what you do is you break your instruction down into shorter periods of instruction, not being a talking head, but giving a little bit of instruction, having them turn and talk to a partner to share what they learned, because children only have so much of an attention span. If you give them information overload, they're going to lose it in the process. Just trying to use a variety of strategies.
Mm-hmm.
This is Angie. I have a question. I've always wondered about this, and I don't know, Karen, if you can speak to this or not, but I was wondering, does the environment impact your learning, your development of your learning style at all? For example, if you, as a parent, make choices about how much television is exposed, how much television time your child has, or how much time you spend reading to them, the things that you do as a parent choosing to, fit that environment to support just overall general development of the child, do those experiences and those choices that parents make kind of indicate or help drive a primary or a preferred learning style, or is it more you just come out, that's how you're wired?
I think that I especially encourage parents that when their children get home from school that they need some downtime. They need to have that structure of coming home and having some playtime, and then a set time that you have for homework, for reading in the evenings. You need a structured home life, but you also need that flexibility, understanding that the child needs some downtime to just let off that energy. And when it comes to being able to sit and do their work, they need to have just a short term, and not homework overload, just a certain amount of time that they're focusing on their homework and the tasks that they have that they need to do. But I think environment plays a big part in it. When I talk to my students that are not turning in homework, they're not getting things done, it's usually because they're tired. But they're tired because they were watching TV late into the night, or they were playing video games. And that's where the parent comes in, because they need to reassess the priorities of what the child needs to benefit from.
Right. So as a parent advocate, I often encourage parents to create an environment at home that's diverse, so that the child doesn't just come home from sitting in school all day and sit down and play video games until dinner is ready. That, if they've been sitting in school all day, that there's time for them to get out and play, run around, or, whatever it is that the parent is able to support and encourage. I know some people don't perceive their neighborhood as, can't open the door and let the kid go outside and play unless they feel like they're there. So there is always some considerations, but I just wondered if overexposure to one thing, you don't want to overexpose your child to video games and computers, but you don't want them to have time to play and practice with it, because that's how they get proficient and comfortable and confident with it. So play, for me, I understand, has a lot of different avenues, but it is up to the parent to help create structure about what kind of play and when. Like, reading a book quietly at night before going to sleep instead of playing computer games right before you go to sleep is better for the brain. So I was just wondering if the child comes with that learning style already wired in them, or is the learning style adapted through the environment that they grow up in?
Well, that's a really good question, and that's one that even teachers ponder, because we wonder sometimes if what we're seeing in the different, students coming up, we see more and more students dealing with attention issues, and we often wonder if the technology has played a huge part in that, and if it's not quickly moving, and their eye, when you're playing video games, that brain connection. So I think there's a lot to be said about the environment. I think with the home environment, that if the parent includes the child in negotiating as far as their schedule, what time they're going to come home and play, what time they're going to get serious and sit down and do their work, they'll have more buy-in on the side of the student, on their child, because when they feel like they've had some part in it, they tend to take ownership of it. So that might be something that parents can do with their children, is sit down and discuss, hey, we know what we need to do, we know what we want to do, how can we work this out where we're both happy with the situation. The other thing is, even in the classroom, no longer can you have students just, I'm self-contained, and the tendency would be to sit in your desk all day, which is something that is not conducive to good learning. So we have to incorporate a lot of movement into our daily activities, even taking brain breaks frequently, standing up and doing some activity exercises just to move the day around and get their bodies moving. Also, structure in the classroom. For those children that are not, their learning style is that it has to be quiet in order for them to concentrate. We have to have periods of time during the day where we have the environment that it is quiet and they are able to process information they learned and be able to show the success from that. But you have to have that incorporated into your daily instruction or home environment, some kind of structure conducive to their learning. I think the first thing is understanding how they learn best. And if it is hands-on and kinesthetic, then there's ways at home that you can incorporate that with posters and flashcards, having them create a little project to go with whatever they're doing, that they're learning at school. If it's auditory, make sure that they read aloud to themselves so they can hear the information that they're having to understand. Maybe make sure that you've clarified instructions for them. Visual learners, they need a lot of they need the guidelines of being able to see the information and read the information clearly. So, again, and this may be different from the parent, and that's where that understanding comes in, that collaboration.
Right. And all those two websites as resources that you gave, one of them, the second one, the Education Planner. Yeah, educationplanner.org/learning styles is a place for parents to, go and take an assessment. And I always like to describe an assessment as a snapshot. It's a good picture of where you're currently at. But if you assess somebody at 7 and then you're working with them 5 years later at the age of 12, you might want to do another snapshot because the picture is going to look different. So an assessment is helpful because it's a snapshot in time, but don't be married to the snapshot in time because, as you said at the beginning of this great conversation, the child is an ongoing, evolving, moving, growing. I mean, heck, that's what we want them to do. We want them to grow and change. We want them to be able to, extrapolate and get more knowledge and information and, play with it and help them understand it. So
which actually brings up a question I'd love to ask you, Karen. And again, maybe you know, maybe not, but do you think that a person's preferred learning style can change as they mature?
I think it definitely can change. I think that it may not completely change, but you can, as I said, it may be a combination of two styles that work best for you. I think the biggest thing is understanding what works best for you. And once they are able to understand themselves and how they learn best, it may be that as they grow and mature, that, and you see this as an example in a lot of college students that were in elementary, it was more kinesthetic because they needed a lot of movement and variety. When they get to college, they have that maturity and ability to sit during long lectures and understand and process information. So a lot can be said about changing and growing and maturing.
And so, therefore, it also sounds to me like you're describing that as they change and grow and mature, they might be able to work better in any of the three learning styles. Would that maybe also be true?
Yes, and by then, too, having an understanding of those learning styles themselves. What I'm doing with my students right now is I'm helping them to understand what is the best learning style for themselves. It's very enlightening for them to know this is how I am at my best. This is how I process the information I need to know. But I do believe that they do change as they grow and mature and understand the different types.
All right, so can we circle back, Karen, and just recap a little bit? You were giving us suggestions on how to craft the home study environment for the kids, and you were saying for the various learners you had some specific tips. Can you just recap that part for us?
Yes. Kinesthetic learners, one of the ways to really help them at home is create a hands-on activities, go with what they're learning, maybe have them draw graphic organizers to do with their assignment. Maybe they can do research and get pictures to go with the lesson. These are the students that, rather than sitting for long periods of time, might need to get up and move around, maybe sit on the floor and work. The visual learners, have them create flashcards to go with vocabulary. Maybe they can help create their own study guides, wall charts, text with pictures and captions. Those are very beneficial to them. Auditory learners, have them, one of the things that I have found with my auditory learners in the classroom, I use these things called wispy phones that you can get at any educational store, or you can order them online. But the wispy phones, they put it to their ear and they read aloud to themselves, and it just helps them really focus and hear themselves read. And for auditory learners, this is a really good tool because it does help them be able to hear the information from their own reading back to themselves. It helps them to retain what they've learned.
And can you tell me how that is spelled, the wispy phone?
It's a wispy phone. It's WHISPY.
Okay, wispy phone. All right,
because
thank
they're
you.
basically whispering into it.
But yet it amplifies it. That sounds wonderful. So they whisper into it, so they're not disturbing their classmates, but yet it amplifies it for their hearing only, over their ears. Is that right?
Yes, and it's a great tool for auditory learners. And last year I had several that really required that. Once they understood that's what worked and helped them, they would go right to the cabinet and get the wispy phone when they were reading and just use that, and it really just did help them a great deal.
So it really helped them with their comprehension.
It sure did.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic.
Well, and you see the confidence in them when they understand that about themselves. It helps them, it moves past the frustrational level to the confidence in I'm understanding what I need to be my best.
That wraps up another great conversation for busy parents. This is Parent Coach Janet Bonnin thanking you for joining us today on Wise Parents, Wise Kids, an interview series with experts who help you parent smarter. Learn more about Fine-Tuned Families by visiting us on the web and connecting with us through LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. If you want more information on today's conversation, go to www.finetunedfamilies.com click the Get Help Now tab and enter the name of today's topic. I'll be happy to send you the link to this recording, PowerPoint notes on the call, and links to the resources we discussed on the call.